What was your first impression of Singapore? Did you have any image of Singapore before coming? And then what was the expectations versus the reality?
My understanding was that it was clean, efficient, safe, everything worked, good weather, it was perpetual summer. And by and large, I moved here and that's exactly what it was. And so there's been no disappointment in terms of those expectations. I love Singapore. I really do. I'm a PR now. I'm very, lucky to be PR. And, it's just such a great city. You feel comfortable. There's been traditionally a political debate, the sacrifice between if you have liberty, you can't have security, and if you have security, you can't have liberty. And I think that's a fallacy because Singapore, in my view, has liberty and security. And in fact, security leads to liberty. Because if you have security in the sense that you can walk through a park and not look over your shoulder, what's going to happen? You can feel safe. You can feel safe with your children. On transport, you're not worried about anything going wrong.
Yeah.
You feel free. It's empowering, it's liberating. So that for me is real freedom. And so long as you're not a criminal and breaking the law, what have you got to worry about having restricted freedom? So I'm very much pro the balance that they have here, which I think works very, very well. You're paying low tax for something that works really, really well. For everything that works around you, because it's so efficient and so modern. And I think it's easier. It's a nation state. It's small. It's an island state, and so it's obviously easier to govern. But there's been other small states with small populations who have got it completely wrong. And I think that's testament to the visionary, how Singapore got itself out of its fairly much a swamp only 60, 70 years ago, and how it's moved so quickly out of that and created what it's created today. Where we're sitting now. I mean, you're in absolute first world with this tropical feel to it, and that's a lovely combination. So I moved to England when I was 10, and then went to primary school there, secondary school as well. Then did a gap year in Tanzania, so I was teaching geography and physics in a secondary school just under Mount Kilimanjaro. So every morning I woke up to the view of Kilimanjaro looming over me, which was pretty cool. It wasn't an easy experience. I had some really tough times as well. I had a gun pulled on me, for instance. My very last day in the city, Dar es Salaam, which is Arabic for haven of peace. Disclaimer, it is by no means a haven of peace. I had someone come up to me and my friend, and he said, are you Americans? And my friend said, well, no, why? And he said, well, I hate Americans. And there'd been some tension, there was sort of some terrorist presence actually on the east coast of, Kenya and Tanzania, and still is to some extent. And so there was a feeling that, that I was sort of almost the enemy, and he really threatened me. And I said, well, I'm not American, I'm English. Look, I had an England football shirt on, it was in the middle of Euro 2004. He took a step back, and I remember his eyes twitching, I remember this very vividly. He took a step back and he suddenly just pulled out a gun and just pointed at me and my friend, and up and down. And my reaction at the time was fairly ridiculous, and I still can't quite work it out why, but I genuinely started to laugh, and I didn't quite comprehend the drama of the situation. It just seemed quite surreal, and so I think he was quite surprised by that. He took a step back and then disappeared off into the crowd, and I didn't see him again. So that was Tanzania, but it was an amazing experience, and I think hardened me as well.
What do you think the attitude of Singaporeans towards you as a British? Do you feel any bias, or is completely normal?
I think on one hand, there's a feeling of mutual respect. There's a fondness. Obviously, the British were intimately involved in recent Singaporean history, the last 200 years. And so there's a commonality in some respect of culture. There's more of a bridge between British British culture and Singaporean culture than, let's say, German and Singaporean. So in that sense, there's more of an entente. And often I'm speaking to Singaporeans, they speak fondly about the British, and certainly most of them have a British football team that they support. And we can talk at length, often my most common taxi conversation, is about a football team, an English Premier League football team. And it's a way to reach a sort of, a commonality, and it's very quickly, football is a fantastic language, transgresses any language differences or cultural differences. Sometimes I've noticed elements a little bit of, I don't know, potentially some feeling of, I wouldn't say resentment. It's good that the British are gone, so to speak. But I have to say, that's not been a big feature in my experiences at Singapore. Mostly it's on the positive side.
Do you remember any cultural shocks when you first came to Singapore?
The food, I'm still getting used to the food. I haven't quite adapted to everything, and it's a hodgepodge. Look, in Singapore you can find whatever you want. So it's very cosmopolitan in that sense. If I want to eat European, I can live off European food my whole life. Obviously with work, and because it's important to broaden, our experiences. So I have been eating also quite a lot of local food, Chinese food, Peranakan food, Indonesian food. food, and I'm still kind of getting used to the spice or the sort of different types of meals. Otherwise, from a culture's perspective, I mean, the mentality here, of course, is different to European mentality. I think the Singaporeans are more sort of, well, certainly from my experience at work, straight down the line. They say what they think. There's sort of, I guess, less of the social niceties sometimes when it comes to, let's say, your boss telling you that you need to wear something different or look different or say something different in a meeting. I think there's less of the softening of that. It's just very direct. You know, you need to do this better, you need to do that. But you get used to that, and it's not personal, it's not sensitive. So it's just a case of getting used to it. And of course, there's certain ways to approach people as well, particularly the older generation. It's how do you talk to them, how do you contact them. There's an element of reverence for the older generation. You have to keep to that. You know, that's sort of courtesy here.
Can you give an example? Like, what would be different? Like, if you're talking to someone or dealing with someone this age and status here and in the UK.
So, for instance, if I had a client and I had to update them on some news, let's say a big piece of news or something that was either positive or negative, sending a text message is not the polite thing to do.
Do you like the weather?
I do. You know, some people complain about the weather. I like the heat. The humidity can be challenging. I remember once going to a meeting. It was when I just moved to Singapore. It was in my second month of being here. And I had a meeting and I was, dressed up in my suit and I was late. And I made the terrible mistake of running to the meeting.
No, you don't do it.
It was a 15-minute run in the midday heat. And I never made that mistake again. Because I turned up to the meeting looking like I'd fallen into a swimming pool. I mean, genuinely I was, dripping. But I think, humans are adaptable and we acclimatize. And now I'm fairly used to the heat, and I can now walk in the heat without noticing it too much.
Can you recall any crazy stories with dealing with billionaires, without names of course, but something like this stick to your mind?
For instance, I went to Hong Kong and I was meeting next gen billionaire, family-owned billionaire, and he was giving me a whiskey sampling experience, him and his friend, and we were doing blind tasting of some incredible whiskeys, 45-year-old sort of Port Ellen, that sort of stuff. Each sip of that probably cost me more than my monthly rent. We ended up getting fantastically drunk, incredibly drunk, and I was, the vulnerable one. I got so drunk that I ended up going to the bathroom and sort of being, I had a very intimate relationship with the bathroom sink for about half an hour, and in the end they had to come and pick me up and put me into the taxi home, and that was my first meeting with this guy, and I was like, oh damn it, I've completely blown it, How could I have so shamelessly got so drunk? And I, next morning I'd missed my alarm clock from my flight back to Singapore, and I remember getting on I was with my boss, and I got onto the MTR, and in the airport express to the airport, and I was sick on the train. This is so shameful. I can't believe I'm revealing this for an audience. The week after, I did the biggest trade I could have with that client, because somehow we had connected on that level, which was he saw that side of me, which was the human side, not the banker side. Tom being the human, the fallible, someone who on the sink being sick, and he had to carry me out to the bar. So I think you get these types of experiences, and that was fairly colourful. But again, it showed me, and it's back to another point, which is showing your human side is really important.
Yeah. Since you have this vast experience dealing with super successful people, what would be the main difference for you if you're dealing with someone like super high level versus normal person?
That's the thing. I think it's important not to deal with them differently, because super wealthy people don't want to be elevated onto a pedestal and have artificial relationships. In fact, what they're seeking is normal life, and it can be actually quite lonely, and probably they feel isolated because no one deals with them as humans. They all see them as opportunities to make business from, to make money from. There's always some agenda, so I think trust is a big issue for some of these billionaires, because either they've been screwed many times, or they know that someone has an agenda, and it's almost transparent in the way that people deal with them, because there's this either an obsequiousness or a reverence that feels artificial, and they don't really like that. I always try and deal with them as completely as normally as I can, with respect to being respectful, of course. I mean, as my whole point, but that's a cultural point. That's not a wealth point. I will be respectful from a cultural perspective, and because it's the right thing to do, but I won't try and differentiate between wealth strata, if you see what I'm saying.
I think the one thing that is probably more different is the time factor.
Yeah.
So they have much less time.
Time is critical, and you realize at that level how important it is. And so, what I've noticed, a certain characteristic commonality between the billionaires I've worked with, is that it's no nonsense. They want the answer, they want it quickly, they want the results, and so they want you to not, BS them in any way, shape or form. And they can see through it very transparently on the whole. And you're also often dealing with these brilliant people who have done incredibly well in life at their certain industry, whatever it is. So they may be a certain way on the spectrum of just being so laser focused on what it is that they've done to be, it's their passion, it's all encompassing. So you just have to bear that in mind and kind of work with that and try and speak their language. Match them on that passion, match them on the enthusiasm. Be efficient with them, be quick, give them the answers, no nonsense.
What would be this balance between no spending their time, no wasting their time, versus you still have to talk about family and still you have to build this rapport, build these relationships? How do you balance it?
They have to trust you. And I think what's really important in terms of earning that trust is you have to show competency and integrity. These are the two key qualities and characteristics you need to demonstrate to billionaires, and quickly. You have to do that quickly because they don't have much time. So you can do that simply in the way you talk. Speed at which you talk, the tonality, changing the tonality, the comments you make. You want to be insightful, you want to be interesting, you want to be slightly different. So you can demonstrate competency fairly quickly through simple conversation. You can do 2 in 1. You can talk about family and demonstrate empathy and demonstrate understanding, demonstrate interest in them, and then connecting dots. You can demonstrate creativity. They make a comment, you can link it with something else that might be relevant to you or something completely different. And by that, you're demonstrating creativity. That's how you can quickly sort of go up the curve of gaining their respect and trust.
Since they value their time so much, what would be your elevator pitch for a billionaire if you wanted to explain why you should subscribe to this channel?
Despite the hectic and busy lifestyles, it's important for them to always go back to what it is about human relationships and understanding other people's perspectives, a variety of perspectives, in order for them to be better leaders, to keep at the back of the mind, what are the levers of human motivation? And I think what you do in your channel extremely well is you dig deep into what motivates people, and different people as well. And that is fundamentally important to be a good leader. You need to understand people, and I think through your channel, they would be able to sort of keep that, front of mind, and therefore they, of course, should subscribe.
So guys, if you want to be a better leader, subscribe to the channel. I think it's super cool to be around this level of people because you can learn a lot from them. What do you think you learned from these high-level people, and what's the common features that they share among them?
For instance, with the new, the one I'm working with now, the Swedish chap, I'm joining his family office. He's amazingly driven and focused and passionate about his work. And he taught me something interesting recently. He doesn't drink. And I asked him why he doesn't drink, and he says because the hangovers take up his time. And every moment counts, to your point about time being important. And so I've actually stopped drinking. Not that I drank much, but really I will only do it in extreme scenarios if I have to. But I realized I don't need to, and the hangovers were taking up my time. And I hated being unproductive because of drinks.
Do you go out or used to go out with billionaires here in Singapore?
Yeah.
Where would you go and what did you do?
We'll go to clubs like Marquee, for instance. I've done that a few times, go out partying. That has happened a few times, I must say. Again, a lot of these guys, they just want to let their hair down. There's obviously tremendous responsibility and pressure on them from their families and shareholders. And so Friday night party is something that's just an outlet for them. It's a valve, right? So I've been invited to quite a few of those types of parties, and that's really fun. What else? I mean, a lot of them play golf. I'm useless at golf, so that's not something I've done. I'll meet them, at some sort of members bars or whatever it is, some nice restaurants. We'll go. Often they'll introduce me to their friends. That's another thing, in terms of building the network. It's sort of referrals. They'll bring a friend, they'll be introduced, and that's how it goes.
Is there a big private party scene in Singapore?
There is actually, yeah, it's growing quite quickly. I think there's been a sense from the Singapore government to not necessarily support and encourage it, but at least allow it to happen. Because obviously with what's been happening in Hong Kong and China, there's been obviously big inflows of people coming from Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a very different party atmosphere, and so now Singapore has tried to, I think, embrace that a little bit more. And you'll get a ton of these private party groups springing up everywhere. I'm friends with a few DJs here. There's always these sort of weekend parties going on, and I'll get invited. Some of them are private in the sense that no one really knows about it. It's word of mouth, and you just have to be part of in the know. Yeah. That's happening a lot, and that I think it was an expression of sort of freedom after COVID in particular. It really exploded. Yeah, Singapore is really catering to that now. And so when people say, "Oh, Singapore's sterile, it's boring, nothing, there's no fun," that's not true. If you want to have fun in Singapore, there's definitely fun in Singapore.